Congrats, you're a CTO, which means you're in the C-suite and you're finally, genuinely, really an executive, right? Like Pinocchio, you're no longer just a toy, you are a real executive. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. The title is just a title. It does not mean you are really acting as an executive automatically. We see all over the place, especially in startups, people who are plainly glorified managers. They have a very nice title, but they aren't really using the right responsibility and the right attitude and mindset to act as everything their position has to offer. And so many times, the reason they're not there is not because the CEO doesn't let them, it starts with you. In this video, we're going to talk about how you can become the real executive you ought to be, whether you're a CTO, VP of engineering, and whatever title you've got, or if you're aspiring to become one of those. If you want to be a real executive, let's go over how you can get there. By the way, if you're new here, hi, I'm Aviv Ben-Yosef. I'm a tech executive, coach, and consultant, and I help people just like you become the best versions of themselves. And what we're talking about today in this video is actually something I've had so many people over the years have issues with and try to help them, because we often think that the title should be enough. Because when it comes to code, if you have the right words, it just works. However, that's not the case in the real world. We have to sometimes do more than that. And just having the titles change in the org chart doesn't mean that you automatically have upgraded your software in here to become that real executive. And the topic of today is something that I call in my books moving upstream, how you as a leader can genuinely take that position of a leader and not just a team lead that's got a fancy title. Now let's start with realizing why this might be problematic. If you don't realize the vast array of opportunities your role opens for you and you don't utilize them, you will eventually end up in a position where someone is thinking, why do we even have that person? Are they really what an executive, a CTO in our company ought to be? They will start looking at what's happening in other teams or compare you to your predecessor or other CTOs they worked with in the past and realize that maybe you're not the right person. Maybe you don't have what it takes. What even is a CTO? I cannot get into that because the title has so many different meanings, and I have a different video about the different archetypes of CTOs and tech executives that will be here on a card on screen, so you can drill into that and even realize what your role ought to be. However, let's talk about the responsibility you've got to have. If you're a fellow nerd, you probably read some comics or watched some Marvel videos or whatever, and you know Spider-Man. And if you know Spider-Man, you probably know what Uncle Ben told Peter Parker: with great power comes great responsibility, right? I'm here to share the inverse law. With great responsibility, which I'm sure you have as an executive, right? You have the responsibility for the entire engineering organization, for crucial parts of the roadmap, for a big chunk of the company's budget, that sort of stuff. You have so much responsibility. With great responsibility, there ought to come great power. And if you don't wield that power, it is just wasted. So my question for you is, how is your power being translated into real world impact on the company? Moving upstream is about placing yourself in that position that allows you to have all the leverage necessary and that your role necessitates. Not because you're playing politics, not because of your ego. And this is something that I always have to help people with. You might feel like demanding to get to be in those meetings, in those areas, having that influence that you have to have. Working to get there, if you don't automatically get there, does not mean that you're playing politics. You're not being a bad player. If you do this from the right reason, which is you want to give the company what you can give, you want to ensure that the organization you're managing is able of producing the most amount of impact, you want to do this from the right reasons. Given that, no one can think you're doing this just for politics and ego, and you shouldn't be thinking about that. And if you have that weighing down on you and preventing you from claiming your spot around the right table, you're making a very big mistake here. Don't think about it from that point of view. And once you start thinking about things differently, others will see it differently as well. I promise you that. And if you know how to explain why things are important, and it's not about I want to be there because my title means I should be there, but because you can make the case for how you can help, then things will start getting better and easier for you. The first part of moving upstream is fixing your mindset. And once you have that down, you will do better. And if you're not sure how to do that, my email's in the video description. Write to me, and I've got a few slots for diagnostic calls that are free, 20-minute sessions where I try to find with you something to help you. Action items you can start doing right now to improve yourself. No strings attached. So grab one while they're still available. Now, let's talk about how to actually move upstream, not just in your head, but with people around you. The first part is to start being in the right meetings. If you're thinking that you're a CTO, you're a technical person, and therefore you don't need to understand or take part in the business parts, you got something really wrong. Being an executive means precisely that. You have to take part in understanding and shaping the company's roadmap and business, and you have to really understand it. So start with really understanding what's happening. Can you explain why the roadmap is as it looks? Do you know what the company's situation is when it comes to its health, its burn rate, its runway? Can you explain all of those? Can you explain why we're currently focusing the roadmap on this instead of that? What our competitors are doing, how we're different, what the company's strategy is? You have to understand all of those and understand where maybe that's not something that even the CEO knows. So you become a real peer of the execs in the executive team. You aren't just there waiting for them to tell you what to do. You're there as an equal among equals, helping them and working with them to shape what the company is currently doing. So start with gaining that knowledge. Maybe you need to go through onboarding all over again. Maybe you need to sit in some client calls, go through some docs, ask to be privy to, board meeting summaries if you're not there, maybe sit there as an observer in the beginning, but start getting there. Once you've started compiling your product mastery that allows you to understand the product and the business, we move on to being part of the right meetings. Moving upstream is about gaining more altitude. If you're downstream, you just see the tasks as they appear on Jira. You know, usually just a few days in advance, what is asked, and then you have to very quickly find a solution. As you move upstream, you gain more and more visibility for what's coming ahead. And having that knowledge will allow you to ensure that your organization is set up correctly for that. You will find the right balance between short-term and long-term thinking to ensure that what we're doing not only delivers what we currently have in this specific sprint, but you will understand what's coming ahead. So for example, I want you to be part in the regular executive meetings that are taking place where people are talking about potential partnerships, potential directions, so that if the company has decided that it will expand to new geographies down the line this year, you will be aware of that, not once it's already a task for the next sprint, but months in advance, which means you'll be able to notice all sorts of areas where your team is making decisions and where it makes sense, where it's not over-engineering. You can say, let's not assume that, or let's find a provider that actually has support in both of these continents in several time zones, because we know we're going to need that later on, and let's not just make the decision right now to have to change it within 3 months. That extra context that you'll have is the result of moving upstream. So you need to be in those meetings where those things are discussed. If you're not there already, You know what you need. You already have the tool probably, and it's right here. It's your elbows. You're gonna have to start elbowing your way into those conversations. How do you do that? If you're not invited automatically because no one ever realized you need to do that, maybe your predecessor wasn't in those meetings, partly maybe why they are now just predecessors, and maybe for a while now you didn't think you need to be doing the business stuff, so no one thought you want to be there, whatever it is. It's time to start realizing where those meetings are and then elbowing your way into them. To do that, start noticing when you hear about something too late and then start, doing the 5 whys, realizing when it was decided, who made the decision, how long ago, in what forum, so you can be there. If your company has open calendars with your peers, I think there's nothing wrong with looking at their calendars and seeing if there are any recurring meetings you need to be invited to and just say, I'd like to be there. Just that. That's step number 1 in getting into those meetings and starting to move upstream. Okay, you're there, you're gonna get the invites. Now what we want you to do is to start being present in those meetings. So don't just be there silent and taking note of everything. I want you to start being an active participant. And if you feel like, what do I know? How can I help? Whatever, start with asking questions. It's as simple as that. Sometimes someone with an external perspective, which usually is you, will be able to ask some very nice questions because you don't have the same groupthink that they might have already developed. You come with a different set of assumptions, and if you're not afraid to ask questions, you just might uncover something very important. But even if not, even if you don't make everyone go like, oh yeah, that's a good question, you will learn. So don't just try to Google everything you don't understand or ask ChatGPT, hey, they just said this, why? Be a participant. You're a peer. You need to understand what we're talking about. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to say something that you feel like might be common sense and you're just stupid for asking it. I have another video about using common sense as an offensive weapon. Will be on a card somewhere here. And I think that if you start making those questions, if you start verbalizing what doesn't make sense for you, you will very quickly learn, and people will very quickly get used to you being there in that room. You're not just, someone on the side taking notes for the action items, which you can do, that's fine. But you're also a participant. You're someone who actively tries to understand, and people really value that. When I see someone asking questions and I see their questions getting deeper and more complex, more profound with time, I can realize that someone is really making an effort, and that's critical for you to become a peer for your team. Once you've started asking questions, people are used to you speaking in those meetings. The next part, of course, is to start verbalizing your opinion. It doesn't mean that whatever you're thinking should be what the company chooses to do. That should never be your metric for success, but you should be voicing your opinions. You should be providing some ideas. Maybe as you're working, you'll start having ideas and you'll start writing them down in your notebook, so when the next time you're there, you add things to the agenda. I think we need to think about that, or I had an idea. You start being an active participant in the shaping of the company's roadmap, in the shaping of the strategy. And this is very critical because if you're focusing on creating an engineering strategy, oftentimes I say you're working too downstream because the company needs to have one strategy where tech is a major part of that, and everything else should be then trickling down to others. I don't want every executive to come up with their own strategy and have all of those Notion docs, whatever. I don't care how important that makes you feel. Usually that means we're not doing things properly and we're not utilizing our resources and our thinking correctly. Be an active participant in those meetings. Start giving your ideas to others. Start sharing what you're thinking. Start coming to them with your own personal backlog of things you feel like we need to talk about. And as you start doing that, you're moving more and more upstream to the point where not only you are at the top of this mountain and you can see what's coming ahead, you're actively deciding which direction we're going to be going to. Or you're not deciding by your own, but you're working with others and you have this leeway. And then, my friend, will you become a real, genuine executive. You're not just someone that has a flashy title, you're someone that's wielding the power that should come with your great responsibility. And if you do that, I promise you, you'll have a lot more fulfillment and motivation in your work. The company will get a lot of more value and everyone will be more pleased. This is a win-win-win. I hope you're gonna start moving upstream. Make sure that you're in the right meetings, elbowing your way, learning the product mastery, voicing your concerns, asking questions, giving ideas, and becoming the executive I know you can be. Thank you for watching, and if you like this, please like and subscribe so you're gonna get the next ones, and I always appreciate your thoughts in the comments. Ciao.